Hey everybody, John here from Incomesh.com, and on your homepage, one of the key things you need to include is kind of your pillar core competencies, the things that you stand for and that you want your blog to immediately resonate with your audience. And you have only a few seconds to really do that before they decide, maybe this guy is not really for me, and they bounce off and go someplace else. And in today's video, I want to show you how you can make a nice little interactive set of icons and buttons that will clearly show you what you're all about to your readers, and it'll look something like this by the time that we're done. Look kind of cool, right? So sometimes when you have icons and text, you don't know if it's really clickable, you don't know if it's a button or if it's just kind of there to look pretty. But when you add some of this kind of customization and some of the styling, you clearly show your visitors this is a clickable icon. It's very nice and centered and easy to understand, and it's not that hard to do. So let's go ahead and build that together right now. What we're going to do is go into New, and we're going to add a new page. And let's just give it a quick title, call it Pretty Icon Buttons. And I'm going to go ahead and hide myself so we can have a lot of space here for this tutorial, and we'll launch Thrive. Okay, so we have a simple little blank page right now. I'm not going to load a template. We're going to just use my existing theme because I think it's important to show your buttons, your menu, and all that as much as possible throughout the experience. So what we want to do here to kind of replicate my home screen, let me just have this as our kind of guiding light here. We want to kind of create this 3-column layout, and we're going to have some icons, some text, and some nice little styling to it. So let's get right to it. The first thing we're going to want to do is create kind of the structure of the page, which is going to be columns. So we'll click on the columns icon and give it a 1/3 width for each one of the columns. And then if you wanted to use image icons, you could pull images in. For simplicity, let's just use the icon library here. So let's create an icon. I'm just going to search for icon and pull it into one of the columns. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build out one column the way that I like it, and then we'll duplicate it and just make the small tweaks that we need. So let's go ahead and just find a cool icon. Let's say you want to talk about a podcast, you want to talk about a video, and you want to talk about a blog. So we'll find icons that kind of represent those 3 areas here. Okay, so we have our icon here, and one thing that we're going to want to do pretty early on in the process is start using some content boxes. And content boxes are kind of one of those things when you first get started, you're like, why do they even have this element? What is this thing's purpose in life? But once you kind of get into it, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I love content boxes. That's kind of how I feel right now. My wife, she's sitting over here next to me. She's like, what is a content box? It's a geeky thing, but you'll really start to appreciate the flexibility of the content box. Enough about content boxes. Let's go and move on. And let's take this icon and put it into the content box. All right. And we'll do the styling in just a second. Let's just build the backbone here. Let's put a header underneath this and just let's make it like an H3 so it's a little bit smaller. And let's call this podcast, or listen to the podcast. Looks pretty cool. So now what we're going to want to do is inside of the content box, let's start doing some settings. And these settings will apply to everything that is inside the box. So the first thing we want to do is just make sure that our typography is centered. That's going to put the podcast centered right there. We're also going to want to have some margin here, let's call it padding, because we want to make sure that our button doesn't look like they're all squished up on top of each other. So let's go ahead and first give it a background color just to make it clear what we're working inside of. We'll just give this a nice little gray here. Apply that setting. And now as we kind of look at it, the reason why we want to put some padding is this is really right up on it. And if we had more text, you can really get to where it's all the way up on the button. That doesn't look very good. So let's go to our content box, go to our layout and position. I'll put this little link on here, which will make sure that all padding is applied evenly. And let's just start with maybe 15 pixels of padding. And now you can see that looks much better, clearly a button. But as I look at it, 2 things I want to do on this style is I want to give it a border, a little slightly darker gray border, and I want to round those corners. And let's go ahead and do that together here. So we can go to borders and corners and give it a 1 pixel border up here. And right now it's black. That's a little too stark. So we'll kind of take that black and move it up here and just make it a darker gray, which looks a little bit more modern. Looks kind of nice. And let's go here and round out the borders here a little bit, just make it look a little bit more buttony. And you can go nuts with this. I mean, you can kind of scroll this all the way up until it's a big circle, which I think looks not very good. So we won't do that. Let's go back to that nice subtle looking, I think it's like a 15 pixel button. Looks nice. So the last thing that might make this look a little more buttony, which I'll just coin that term, is maybe a little bit of a drop shadow. Now, if you're going for more of a flat design, a flat aesthetic, you might not want to do this. But I don't know. Recently, I've been liking the drop shadow, so we're going to put one in there. And now this is looking clearly like a button. So what is the one last thing we can really do to solidify this as being an interactive element on your page? And that is to add things that happen when you hover over the element. So as the way that I worded that implies, we're going to click on the content box one more time. And now we're going to change our state and add separate settings, separate configurations to the hover state. So this is one that it took me a little while to really master. So I'll kind of go through this and talk through every step. So when you click on hover, you now it grays out the rest of the screen, and it makes you realize, okay, whatever you do is only going to apply to this element when it's being hovered on. So you've got a more limited set of options. Like you can't change the padding and some of those things that really wouldn't make a lot of sense to do during a hover animation. But what you do have are things that are very obvious. So you can display a tooltip, which I don't like that. We won't do that today, but we will do a CSS animation. And this is so when you hover over it, do you want it to grow, shrink, pulse, push, pop, bounce in? I don't even know what half of these are. What is hang? Okay, that's kind of cool. Kind of play with a couple of these buzz. Buzz. Yeah, let's go with buzz. That's quite annoying, but we'll go with it for the demonstration. So we're going to give it a buzz when we hover over it. And let's also just slightly tweak the background color. And what I like to do, instead of actually changing the color itself, let's add another layer of colors on top of it. So this will just be kind of like adding a darker or lighter level on top. So we'll add a white, and we'll bring that opacity down to maybe like 10%. And so what that does, let's go ahead and kick out of our hover state. And we're actually going to need to preview this to show you how that works. I forget, sometimes the hover actions don't really work in the editor itself. So we'll preview what we've done. So there you go. It's kind of slight. We'll make the color change more obvious so you can see it, but it's changing color, and it's also kind of going nuts on us here, which is kind of fun. So let's go back into our editor. Let's just go back into our hover state one more time, and let's change this gradient. Let's actually make it darker. That'll be more obvious to see. And let's increase the opacity just to make it clear that it's doing something. And let's get out of our hover state. And somehow we actually had an animation added when I was kind of testing it around. So now we can see our color change, and we're good to go. One obvious thing you do want to include, which I was about to forget to tell you, is you actually want it to go someplace. You want this entire area to become a clickable link. And to do that, you just click on the animation and action, add a link. And you're going to want to do this in the normal state. And you can just have this go to a website. I'm going to give my wife some love, so I'll send it to her website here. And I'll apply that. And now what's kind of interesting is that will, by default, adjust the color of your icon to your theme's colors. You can override that if you'd like, which I will. I'm not really feeling the orange in this example here. So now we have a clickable area that looks kind of nice. All you have to do now to kind of round it out and change it is just clone and move, and clone and move. Now you have these three side by side. We can just make the small adjustments that we need to. Well, let's make this, we said that we're gonna do like YouTube. So I'm just gonna search for YouTube and find, I like this guy the most. So listen to the podcast, subscribe to the channel, and let's find a blog icon. Maybe a WordPress. Yeah, let's do a WordPress guy here. And we'll say read the blog. What I want to do is make this kind of the same height. So let's say read the latest blog. That'll work. So now we have these nice clean little icons. They all kind of go different places. You want to make sure you change the link to where each one of these is going to, obviously. So for here, for example, let me actually just send this to my resources page. I'll copy the link address here and send this one to that location. And then I will, let's say university, or let's say blog. Take the blog URL and put that as the action for this button here. So now let's go ahead and save this and give it a little preview to make sure we get the effect we really want. So it loads super quick. What's great about this is, these are icons. They're super small in size. I think they're like in just a few little kilobytes. And now we have these very obvious call to action buttons. Maybe this little buzzing is not the best animation to use, but these things are clickable. And then when you click on it, they do what they're supposed to do. Toolbox, and go to the blog. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. This was kind of a fun little down and dirty. I was actually doing this just the other day, and I was like, man, this is really fun to do, but I was going through a few learning curves as I was working through the entire process. And that's one of the double-edged swords of Thrive Architect. You can do anything that you want to with it, but you have to kind of think through the strategy of how you want everything to kind of work out to make sure you're not reworking and reworking. So one of the tips as you're going through this, I would advise you to always think from the outside in. And so, for example, here, I could have made the icon center-aligned, aligned center, and make the text aligned center. And if I had maybe some subtext there, align that center. Or I can click one button and align everything that's inside that content box in that one step. Similarly, when you're doing your hover animations, you might want to link up the text and link up the icon, and then, no, just take the box, the entire box you want to be a button, so set that link once there on the content box. So just in general, of some words of wisdom on how to do that. If you've enjoyed this and want to kind of learn more about how to build high converting landing pages and high converting websites, I love putting out this stuff. I love helping you guys. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell to be notified when I release my next video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.